Hey, everybody. Welcome to another session of the Advisory Board podcast. I've got a special guest with me here today. I guess I'm pointing the wrong way. And this mirror thing's messing me up, Gerry. This is Gerry Henley, everybody. And I want to
Hi,
introduce you to him
guys.
real quick. Go ahead, Gerry.
Hi. Hi. Thank you for having me on, Dave. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and let me jump in and do an intro, and then I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk about yourself for a second, Gerry, because you know you better
Okay.
than I do. But
Okay.
Gerry's a founder and an EOS wizard. His organization is called Launch to Growth. Now, Gerry's had an interesting journey. He's been in franchising about 15 years. He got his start with Kitchen Solvers as a president back right at a terrible time to be in a home remodeling industry, a
Yeah.
franchise, right in the recession period, 08, 09. But where Gerry's been really successful, he's been there. He's been at Office Pride was where he went after that, right? But he's been able to help franchise systems double average, per unit revenues and all sorts of really cool success things. That's kind of what we're going to talk about today. But before, you've probably talked a little about system and soul, I'm guessing as well. But Gerry's the way he does this, part of his methodology is really deploying successfully EOS systems. But our topic today is actually taking a step back about how do you successfully measure unit level performance and create unit level success ratios. So before I would jump into that though, Gerry, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, kind of your journey getting here in franchising, and then we'll jump right into the topic.
Sure. Well, I'm like a lot of other people that got into franchising. I got bit by the franchising bug unexpectedly. And, once you're in, it's like Hotel California. You can check in anytime you want, but you can never leave. It's like nobody retires from franchising.
Yeah.
But I was retained at Kitchen Solvers as an independent consultant to help them out. They were at a crossroads with ownership, and the founder had a couple of missteps in trying to sell the business, and was back in. And he's a friend of mine, and asked me to come in and help. And I knew the kitchen business before my franchising experience. I was in the kitchen cabinetry, in the kitchen cabinet business, at the manufacturing level. And he'd asked me to come in, and I'd done a lot of sales and things. So started working with him, helping with the system. And he really wanted to sell. So I said, okay, I'll help you get it sold. And then I did, and I found some good friends of mine that were actually interested, and they decided to buy it. They came back to me and said, hey, you convinced us to buy this thing, so we really want you to stay and help run it. And I said, okay. That's where I got the bug, and I really did that. And it was that was before the recession hit. So I took the reins in 2009. We were just starting to see effects, but yeah, 2010, that first year I was there, I lost 50% of our franchisees, just because the environment, the economy was so bad. They weren't in good shape going into this. So the system needed some help, but they are just thriving right now. It's a great, excellent system. We got through that. A lot of people did lose that. And so that taught me a lot, but I had to dig in. And I guess I had the benefit of saying, okay, I got to figure this out. How do I do it? And I've always been one to get mentors. I started getting mentors in there. I found John Francis at a Fakery Baker Daniels at that time, Fakery Baker Daniels, and talked him into coaching with me. And he accepted. And I said, man, I don't know this game. My franchise needs some help. He taught me a lot. Aligned myself, people like Keith Gearson at Frank Connect and others. But I quickly focused on unit level performance and how to bring in, like a friend that we have, mutual friend, Scott Greenberg, talks about the wealthy franchisee mindset. How do we take this mindset? How do we get them going? How do we train them right? How do we make it happen? And we really started doing that well at Kitchen Solvers. I then spent 4 plus 5 years with them, and then got recruited by a company called Office Pride that had been franchising for, at that time, 23 years, and had about 120 units. It was a faith-based organization, and I'd known the owner. John Francis actually introduced us. He tried to hire me once before. I said, no, I'm not really interested, because he wanted a person of faith to be his COO. And so a couple of years later, he came back at me and said, Gerry, he goes, would you just pray about this? Would you consider it? And I said, okay. So I ended up moving down here to sunny Florida to take that position.
Mhm.
And by doing that's really honed in on this. We implemented EOS, which was a tremendous traction, which a lot of people are familiar with as a business management system that's just incredible. But we were growing at a pace that was phenomenal. So when I came in, we were at 23 million in system sales with about 120 franchise units.
Mhm.
When I left 4 years later, we were at 56 million with about the same amount of franchise units at about 120.
Hmm.
And so I really honed my thing. And then after I went through EOS, I said, I really like this EOS thing. And I see what this implementer, the coach, does. And I said, well, I could do that. I think that would be kind of fun. And Dan Sullivan, a strategic coach, has a thing called unique ability. And I counseled with a lot of people, again, in franchising, the people I know, my mentors. And I saw a real need that I could, and a service that I could be to the franchise industry to take my show, make my own consulting company, because I truly do have a passion for franchising done right at the operational level, at the unit level. I really do. It just grieves me so much when I see franchisees struggling.
Mhm.
You know, it just hurts. And then, so I decided to do it in October of 2019, right before COVID. Decided to start my own thing, and been very blessed since then. I have some great clients. I'm doing very well at it, having lots of fun, and helping lots of people right now. And so that's kind of been my journey. I think I covered it all. I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Along the way, I did lose some hair. I'm not sure where that all happened at, but
Yeah, but that's all right. There are a few perfect heads on the planet, and God put hair on the rest of them, right? So
that's right.
yeah,
That's right.
one of the few and the proud.
That's
No,
right.
I appreciate your journey. It's funny because everyone's got a unique journey. Often I find people get recruited into franchising and then they never leave. I certainly can empathize with the bug because it's fun. I love being in
Well,
this.
it's just such a great community. I mean, it's unlike any other that I'd ever been involved in. You know, it's just incredible community,
Yeah.
and the franchise or network. I mean, it's just love it.
Yeah, I'll never forget my first event that I ever went to in franchising. I didn't know who Brad and Sherry Fishman were at the time,
Oh,
and new absolute newbie, right? But I'm sitting in this bar, and I'd met Zach at a conference right before. I was at one of our franchise.
you mean Brad Fishman was in a bar?
I know it's a surprise, but
Wow.
so I met Zach the day before, and so I bump into him, like literally we bumped shoulders. Like, oh, sorry. It's like, yeah, I haven't met you yet. He's like, oh, Brad Fishman. I was like, oh, cool. I was like, wait, are you Zach's dad? And he's like, what the hell? Zach's dad. And he just walks off. I'm like, what have I done? I don't even know who this guy is. I didn't realize who they were. Sherry comes over like 5 minutes later, and she hugs me, and she's like, Dave, you just made my night. Like, he's still over there grumbling about being Zach's dad, trying to figure out how the world's collapsing around him. It was really funny. But anyway, since then we've got a very nice relationship. But the reason I bring
Brad and
that
Sherry,
up,
great people. They're one of the pillars. You know, they're great
they
people.
are, and they're welcoming. Like, they seriously, like, they didn't know who I was. Like, come on in, you're part of the franchise family now. Just most industries are not like that at all. They're so close. I've been in high tech and translation, all these different spaces, education, technology, business consulting, and like, it's not like that in any other industry. It's been really unique. So something I love about the franchise space. But we could talk about that all day long. Let's jump into this topic, because you've got something interesting that when you and I first met, when we were in Key West chatting about this over dinner, or I forget what we were, lunch. It was lunch, but I thought we've got to.
Yeah, it wasn't a bar then. I mean, there was maybe a bar involved later, but not then.
Yeah,
we didn't discuss this at the bar then.
There was a bar within Stone's Cast. The entire.
Yeah, but we weren't there. Okay.
Yeah,
don't want to give anybody the wrong impression here.
Yeah, exactly. But let's talk about unit level economics versus unit level performance, because we hear people talk about unit level economics all the time, and you have a little bit of a different take on that. Do you want to break that down for us a little bit and just describe?
Yeah,
I learned to break it up.
Sure, I had it was really resonating well, because when I decided this in October 2019, I actually had a booth and displayed at IFA in February of 2020, right before our famous bug hit. And I have banners for that, and it would really strike people. It's like, I would say on my banners, it says unit level performance versus unit level economics. And people would come up, what do you mean by that? And I'd say, well, let me tell you the story. So Unit level economics is after, I always say that if you wait to measure it on a P&L, it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
Then we start talking about leading indicators and lagging indicators. Well, if I wait to see it on a P&L, if I even get my P&Ls done, most of the time it's a struggle, but we got to make sure you're looking at your number. It's already happened, and all I'm doing is looking at what happened. I'm not building into it. So with unit level economics, just measuring what happened.
Right.
And we fall into that trap. We're in a reactive mode, and we're doing what I prefer to start at unit level performance. That's everything that I do to produce great unit level economics.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a small little twist, and it's like, man, and a good friend of mine, Joe Matthews, and I were talking about it one time. He goes, "Yeah, Jerry, you're making a big deal." Another, I don't think it's like, I think it is important to look at that. So as I was counseling, I'm about ready, to leave off, try to do my own gig here with EOS, which I do. Like I said, I'm in my unique ability now, and I'm just loving it. It's incredible journey. I counsel with a lot of people and that we both know in operations and franchise management. And the thing is that sometimes it can be just a real simple answer. So I just hit upon the thing I call unit level success ratio.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I had, that really resonates with people. So I'd like, if I could, I want to walk through how I do this with a franchisor. I think it really illustrate the basis for that. Would that be okay?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and I want to, before we jump into that, just to break down on the unit level economics versus unit level performance. When we were talking about the thought that crossed my mind, and I know this is kind of the crux of where you're going with the success ratio, is you're measuring the inputs rather than the outputs, right? Like you're coming up with a way to
It leads to
systematize.
that. Yes.
And because they're critical, every input, it can't be measured, but for example, like level of effort and some of those things, but you can measure specific things that will tell you and help you predict what's coming next, right? And you and I we should probably ought to come back to that, but let's talk about the
Well,
success ratio.
I'm a data guy, being a COO, I data. I mean, I love my data to make data-driven decisions, and we got to do that. So I like to measure everything, and that's part of EOS. And now, like you mentioned, a new system I'm working in called System and Soul. But it's having data, it's having all that to look. We got to deal with facts, not emotions,
Right.
And what I found was so what I do is I started working with people, and I interviewed a lot of people at IFA. I've interviewed a lot of franchisors after that, for engagements. And I had this one basic question. I say, okay, if I want to start what I call launch to growth, is basically the period, a 12-month period from when the franchisee begins operations. So I don't know if you're a brick and mortar from build out. So they have started operations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And 12 months later, what's going to be the pace benchmark, and it's at the pace of sales and profitability, the pace of, not what I sold in a year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm building to a pace. So I want to do that.
Yeah.
And I want that to be at a great level. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I say that, and I say, my whole launch to growth then is, how do you design your ops team, your training, your support? You got to have that all going on to be able to reach that pinnacle of success with people. And so I say, okay, what is that benchmark for you guys in your system? A lot of systems, unfortunately, don't have that answer.
Mm-hmm.
So I get them to say it. I'm just going to pick some numbers. Just, I specialize more in service-based businesses than anything. So let's say, okay, they should be at a pace of $40,000 a month. And I say, okay, and profitability. Well, we think they ought to be here at profitability, maybe 12% EBITDA. Okay, great. Now, I understand that. Okay, so I got another question. If you have all your training and your ops people and everybody focused on that, and the franchisees were doing everything that you asked them to do, and you were doing a good job of holding them accountable and leading them and coaching them, and the soul part of this, because there's emotional side of this and everything else, you're there. Look, they're in charge of execution, but we're in charge of teaching them how to replicate our system. Mm-hmm. And we got to be there. We got to do training's one and done. Coaching's forever. Coaching is reinforcing. Coaching is coaching.
Yeah.
And that's a long-term thing. So I'd say if they were doing everything that you ask, what do you think your success ratio would be of franchisees to achieve your $40,000 a month mark? And a lot of them say 100%. Right? Well, so no, they might say 90 or 95. I said, well, no, look, you're always going to have some outliers. You're always going to have some that slower start. I said, but could I get you to buy 75%? They said, well, yeah. And so this simple little thing that I created said, okay, I call this unit level success ratio. And I said, what I'd like to do, let's go into your system, and anybody that's been in operation for a year or more, how many people are hitting both those factors in sales and EBITDA?
Yeah.
First one I did it with was 4.75%.
Oh no. Oh no. Okay.
Yeah. But we've turned that around. A couple others are 20%, 30%, 35%. Now look, you might get a high score. Okay, that means you're doing it right. But I think there's a lot of franchisors that struggle with this. And what I like about this unit level success ratio and this launch to growth program, now we start training, now we start thinking of times of that 12-month journey to get them there, instead of, okay, well, we're going to do free training, and then we're going to do 1 week of in, and then bless you, my child, you are now a franchisee of ours, and go forth and be fruitful and multiply.
Yeah, which is
that's what we do a lot of
like
times.
80-90% of the programs out there, especially emerging.
I was just talking to
a lot of the emerging.
I was just talking to my friend, our friends training, Brandon over there and Evan. We'd always talk about it. It's like that. There's a journey there. So I created. Okay, so let's have that pre-training. Let's have a week of training. Then let's talk about your reinforcement. And how you're going to walk with them for that 12 months to get in there. Now, what I like about the unit level success ratio is most of the time people are challenged with bandwidth. I can't afford to hire anybody. I can't afford. I know I need to do more, but I can't afford that. Well, I can deal with a CEO now, which I've done all my life, and said, well, let me give you some numbers. Let me show you what it means.
Yeah.
So remember, at Office Pride, more than doubled system sales 4 years with the same number of franchisees. So everybody wants to be focused on average unit volume. And it's so skewed by your top 10%. Skews your numbers always.
Yeah.
We want the middle section to be the sweet spot, as broad as we can. Yeah. So I just look totally get out of that average unit production. By the way, at Off Pride, we went from 200,000 to 500,000, to help do some of this on our average unit production of Fran. But I don't like the average unit volume. I just, it's a useless measurement to me, because it is skewed. Well, we got that. Well, okay, well, if you graph it out and it's a hockey stick, it doesn't work, which it typically is.
Yeah.
So anyway, we just tie this in now. Now we got a measurement system to say, hey, ops team, here's where it is. So you're starting with something. Where are they going to be in 3 months? Where are they going to be in 6 months? Where are they going to be? So it's the old EOS and system and so. I'm just going to start calling it system and so now. System and so is that we start with the end in mind. The end of mind is 12 months. We're going to be here. Okay, now where do we have to be at 9 months? Where do we have to be at 6 months? Where do we have to be at 3 months?
Right.
And then we adjust all the way. So then we set the thing to drive that performance. It sets expectations. We had a conversation earlier, Dave, about make sure you bring the right people in.
Oh yeah.
You got to make sure you bring in the right people in. But it's just odd about this that I find, especially in service-based businesses, and I know you've seen this too, Dave, is that sales is one of the most critical things in a service-based business. Agreed? I mean, to launch and get going.
Sales solves all problems, right? Like
it doesn't matter how certainly if we got the right operations making money.
Right.
But listen, I'll ask you this question, put you on the spot. You would agree with me that sales is one of the most important factors. I'm just going to use this to illustrate part of launch to growth, the part we do.
Sure.
Okay. Sure. And what do you think most systems, how much time do you think percentage-wise of their overall training that they spend in sales training?
Almost none. It's almost abysmal.
Isn't that amazing?
Operation.
It is all. Here's what we do. Here's that, and they spend very little time about education, financial management, cash flow management. See, the P&L is one thing, but I got to have cash flow. I got to have cash reserves. I got to run my cash runway. I'm launching a business. I got to do all this stuff. But just to use that one example,
Yeah.
you can't just have them come in and say, well, watch me do the sales and you'll learn it. No, you got to get them running leads when they get back. You got to get in market with them, coach them, because let me ask you one other quick question. How many people coming into a franchise have actually had sales experience?
I was going to bring this point up. It's very few. I mean, think about this. Most of the people that have saved up enough money to be in a financial position to buy, oftentimes they're coming from operations, financial district. Like they're coming from almost everywhere but so. Even marketers, a lot of them have had a good successful marketing career. They got into marketing because they didn't hack it in sales a lot of times in real life.
Right.
Yeah. So very
So you can see my point, I think, that
Mm-hmm.
we got to be realistic that I think it's a mindset shift for franchisors to say, look, remember my example. If you're doing everything right, and if the franchise is doing everything you're asking to, you got to make sure you're doing everything right. You know, that's what drives unit level performance. It's a whole lot easier to get somebody from 500,000 to $1 million than it is to get somebody from 0 to 500. And then we often ignore those 500,000 because, well, the top people, they're here. Well, no. How do we work with that? We always just got to build that up in that period and always be mindful of that. So now I held my operational teams and I set this up saying, well, we're going to line it from now on. You're going to do it this way. We're going to onboard people. And this is your success measurement. Month 3, with everybody new, month 3, here's where they're at, here's that. And they're held accountable to that. It's like, that's their KPI. That's their accountability. How they doing?
Yeah. And so
then
go ahead.
If they're struggling, we get proactive about it instead of reactive about it. Until they burnt through their cash and they're getting this and they've done that, and it doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't. But to it again, you also got to make, when bringing in the right people, make sure they got capital. And what we do, we say, well, here's the franchise fee and here's this. But what about those 9 months to 12 months that you're not going to really make money, maybe? Or, so how's your personal nut at home? You got to factor that in. I mean, we got to have the cash runway to build this business.
Right. And to build it right. Let me ask you a question, Gerry. So a couple of thoughts. So essentially, we're measuring someone's financial ability to perform on 2 key financial indicators at a certain threshold to determine what our success ratio is, right? Or is there more to it that you generally measure, or is it generally just revenue and EBITDA?
Certainly, there's always benchmarks and milestones to measure and KPIs as they go through this launch to growth process. It's, there's a lot of subsets and everything else, but our end in mind is to be, that's what I said. I want to drive to that, to have that unit level economics.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, okay, so now what is your conversion rate? What is your closing rate? What is this? What is that? We got to start building in, because I'll ask you another question. How many people buying a franchise typically have the financial experience? And we gloss over that. We tell them, well, it's important to do your books. Oh, it is. We can teach them how to read. But hey, they don't know how to do. The biggest factor that I learned with doing EOS and now System and Soul is how to layer this into. I just had a franchisee the other day. I'll just use this example. He says, I just get frustrated with these people in sales and sales. You keep telling me, and you know what? We train them in sales, and then we got these videos and we put them on Frank Connect. I said, oh, really? So I just had to call him out on that. If he ever listens to this podcast, he's going to know who this is. But he won't mind. But I just said, hey, that's fine and dandy. But how good are you at teaching them how to do sales? I don't care what you did in your company. I don't care what your star salespeople there are. You're talking to a new person. How good are you at getting this person to sell your business model? And you can't just say, oh, I gave him videos and, oh, I got it posted on Frank Connect. Now, bless you, my child, you don't sales. But we do the same thing with financials.
Yeah.
I got what I call 3 cash buckets. I got cash reserve, growth capital, and operating capital. And I got a bucket system that I got to maintain all those buckets. If I want to grow the business, it costs money to grow the business. I got to have all three of those buckets at all time and watch that.
Yeah.
But people have never in. So how many people come in with financial background enough to do this? Same answer as sales. No.
Very few. And if they have that background, they don't have the sales background. So regardless, you're gonna have half of one and not the other, no matter what. Yeah.
So
let's
why I have fun on it, and I think it works. I'm gonna get this in, if I may.
Oh yeah.
My
please.
slogan that you see on my website is scale to get better before you scale to get bigger.
Which is absolutely appropriate. Absolutely.
And I did that, and I had a couple of people, and my EOS mentor at the time, Chris White, said, that's really good. I'm going to steal that. And he's not even involved in franchise. So I'm doing this new system with him called System and Soul, which is a new generation thing of EOS and traction. Is really going to be phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to take it to franchise market, to franchisors, to show how, with people like Scott Green, everybody that we can, to say, hey, how do you deal with this mindset of the franchise? How do you deal with this to be able to produce this? But the one thing I see is that when I walk into a system that's struggling, and you've seen this too, Dave, and people are listening to this, know it, felt it, been there, I don't know, but we all recognize, is that they scaled way too fast. Mm-hmm. They sold instead of awarding franchises. Yep. And the franchise fee is great. I always argue with franchise, you don't make any money on a franchise fee. You might think you do. All you're doing is sweetening your cash flow right now, because that chicken's going to come home to roost. You're going to have costs. You're investing that money. You should be invested in training support. It's going to come home. So I just go in and I just see that most of the time they've already scaled. So I just work with you and say, okay, all right. Here's where you're at. Here's where you should be. And here's where you want to go. Now let's stop. And I want to analyze where you're at. Then I'm going to ask you where we should be. Mm-hmm. And training. So I want to wrap this up with a nice bow on it. That gives me a gap. Now the CEOs and top sales, and they say, well, yeah, but I don't have the money to do that. So I'm going to land this plane. Okay. But if I can show you, if you're at 30% success ratio, mm-hmm. and I show you a path to say, okay, well, from now on, when you bring in new franchises, you're going to do it this way, and you're going to, in a year, you're going to have them at 40. And all these other people that you should be at 70% in your system, but you're only at 30%, I got 40% there. And I bet you over the next year, I can move it from 30% to 50%. Mm-hmm. Now, did I just have 20% of growth? And what by 20% of growth, what? Royalties.
Right.
So now I get their mindset, say, well, listen, invest in this, and I can show, this is the main point of this, is now I can show a CEO, I can sit down and say, well, here's how you afford it.
Yeah. And you and
I did an example. I did an example. It's on my website. I've done it on LinkedIn that kind of mirrored what I did at Office Pride. Think about, I went into Office Pride. We had like 5 or 6 people on staff. Mm-hmm. I left. We have 40. Yeah. And how did we afford that? Well, gee, if I was at 23 million, X amount of royalties with 120 franchisees, mm-hmm. and I went to 56 million.
Yeah.
Now, in my defense, also, yeah. Okay, so also on this, as I did this in my budgeting, I show people how to do it. I've done it. I got proof. I've done this. Mm-hmm. Is that all the growth money that I need to invest in new people? Let's say I'm going to invest $250,000 in my budget this year for mm-hmm. new growth, for new people, increasing people and everything else. Yeah. That's paid for in my budget. And I still increase sales 18, 20%, and I still increase EBITDA 18, 20% by doing this.
Right. And it's because, Gerry, you and I spoke about this earlier. A lot of early, especially emerging brands, they get caught up on the cash influx from the fees, the franchise fees that are coming in. But every franchise system, their target needs to be becoming profitable just on the royalty revenue alone, because that's
royalty. Shelley Son always said it best. But royalty self-sufficiency is that's the event that you have to do as fast as possible.
Yeah.
it just so you know, when I work with franchisors, most of them don't have a budget. So me being the CEO kind of guy, I said, well, I function in a budget. Let's get our budget together. And I always separate Fran Dev from ops.
Right.
I said, you don't take any of that profit. So to me, if you have a profit center or Fran Dev, you better invest that money into go and find more franchises.
Right.
If you think that, not support ops.
Yeah.
You got to get razor focused on my ops performance to be in royalty self-sufficient, not including Fran Dev money.
Yeah. I was working with a franchise system that was pretty big. They've been around since the 80s, and they were, and not one of my clients, in case they're listening. I think I'm talking about them, but they were really struggling. They had some executive turnover. They had a couple hundred units. Half of them were on different royalty, like models, like,
different agreements.
It's just a mess, right? But what they told me was that they had to sell X number of franchises every year, or else they couldn't break even. And I was like, oh no! If you're that big and your operating revenue coming in from the franchises is that bad, then you're really in a bad spot. Like, how
you're
can
really
you
in a real bad spot.
Because you're always doing this. You're always doggy paddling to keep your nose above the water to grab a breath. You can never be strategic and build the support network that you and I are talking about right now to get to that success factor that you're trying to get to as a franchise strategist.
So I guess you can see what I was telling you before about the unit level success rate. So, I talked to a couple of people that I know. Shout out to Keith Garrison. He's taught me a lot, and we talked about a lot. But I was saying, Keith, is it really this simple? Did I hit upon it? Is it that? And he goes, oftentimes it is. Yeah, Gerry, it's that simple. Nobody ever just had thought about it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a good way to think about it. Say, well, this is how we hold ourselves accountable to be able to hold the franchisees accountable to hit this benchmark of success.
Yeah, the thing I like about it, it's simple, and in what does Leonardo da Vinci said? He said simplicity is elegance, or there's elegance in simplicity.
Something like it. Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing that's the best about that unit of measure, in my opinion, is that rather than, because a lot of folks, they have like 20, just sheets and sheets of metrics that they're trying to track, and inside of these sheets, they're trying to find, how do I help my franchises? But that's not how the franchisees are measuring their success. Franchisees measure their success in revenue and cash going into their pocket or their EBITDA, right? So
all I know is happy franchises certainly help self-franchise this.
Yeah, well, your validation calls go way better, right? The whole system.
When they place that call and say, "Hey, would you do this? Knowing what you do now, would you do it again? And how much money are you really making?" And I don't care what's in your IT, they're going to validate and say, "Well, how much money are you making?" Well, anyway, yeah, we could go on and on, but hey, I just think it is very, very important. Like I said, I just have that passion for franchising done right from that level, and there's easy paths to do that. So there, for anybody that is listening to this and struggling, there is hope.
Yeah, absolutely, and there's a pathway, right? There are people out there that can guide you through. Gerry, let me ask you one more question, because I know some people listening to this are going to say, okay, I don't have a success factor, a success ratio. I'm not tracking unit level performance. What are some of the first steps somebody should take that will help them get on this sort of a path that will help them measure the right things and align their franchisor goals and values and measurements with franchisee successes? What would you recommend?
Well, one thing I do is I offer that free assessment to walk people through that. So they're free to contact me. I don't charge anything for it. If it makes sense to us to continue the relationship, it's fine. If not, fine. I just want to help. I mean, if I can help somebody get clarity on that, I am thrilled to do that. I love giving back. One thing we talked about the franchising industry, everybody likes to give back to franchise. I mean, so I truly believe that. So I'm sincere about that. There is that way. It's just come up with your benchmark number at 12-month period.
Yeah.
Now, okay, you could have a business model that, well, my ramp up to get there realistically is 18 months, or it's not. Whatever you see for your business model is that, pick it and what should it be. Okay. Yeah. Then be honest with yourself. Now, like I told you before, I had somebody trying to trick me on this when we were talking about it. He goes, well, I got 165 franchisees. And I said, well, that. And we came out and we said, I thought he was in pretty good shape, because he came out like a 60-some% success ratio. And I said, well, okay, that's great. The next time we talked, I dug a little bit deeper, and he goes, Yeah, he goes, but a lot of my franchisees are multi-unit owners.
Right.
Oh, I said, well, how many total territories that you have a separate franchise? Oh, well, I got 280. I said, well, then wait a
Yeah,
minute.
yeah,
No,
that ratio just changed.
we track territories, not number of franchisees that have bought multiple units.
Mhm.
And
Oh
in the
yeah,
beginning, emerging brands do that. They do some giveaways, they do some 3-packs or 5, but we got to track that unit is the territory.
right. And then there's a bit of a trap there too that I've seen. You've seen this, I'm sure, a ton. Early growing franchisees or franchisors, they're trying to get as many territories sold as they can, so they feel bigger and more legit in the validation calls, in the marketing that they're doing, all that stuff. But the challenge that they run into is that they tie up very valuable territories by giving away a three
Yeah.
pack in Charlotte.
And
Where
then they don't have any production in there. And then a legitimate good candidate comes along that wants that territory, you can't sell it to.
yeah, yeah, precisely.
So
Yeah,
back to what to do. Look at that. Look at your system and see how many people that have been in business 12 months or more. We all do that in our FDD, anyway. Most of them are, we always say, well, anybody been in operation for more than 12 months? Okay, you already got that information.
yeah,
Most people do in their item 19. Um, and then just be honest and see what your success ratio is.
yeah.
But
And
if it should be 7, and look, it's got to, if you're doing everything right and you're doing it well, so that means you can replicate your business model and train to it and be good at it. Yeah, I often tell people that, look, you created a business model, you did it, okay, you have success, and I'm going to franchise, okay? And so, and I said, I liken that to saying it's very few professional sports people that become great coaches. There's a reason for that. They might be a great basketball player, but they suck at coaching people or teaching other people how to do it.
mhm,
Okay, we got to get better at that soul side. We got to get better at that side of it, to make this work.
agreed.
So I just mentioned item 19. Let me tell you the one main benefit of doing what I do
Yeah, go for it.
is a very healthy, robust item 19 with great EBITDA. Think about that value.
Yeah.
How many
That
people out
alone.
there are still out leaving EBITDA out and leaving this or trying to fabricate it? Oh, and then this, and it's like, well, all I know, those franchise systems that have great item 19s and do what I'm talking about and doing this, we got a great success ratio and they're killing it. They tend to be pretty easy to sell franchises.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because that's exactly what people are looking for. Smart investors are looking to buy franchises. They're looking for an opportunity that they see a high probability of a strong return. And that's exactly
Yeah.
what that is.
It's not a good position to be in, saying when they ask how much money I can make, well, I can't tell you that.
Or there's a big
I'm not
variation.
allowed to. There's a rule there that I can't tell you that because I don't have it. Why don't you have it in your item 19?
Yeah, yeah,
That's what
exactly.
I'd ask, but I'm maybe I know too much about franchise. I don't know.
Yeah. No, this has been awesome. Gerry, I want to thank you because I think you and I could go on and on for probably another hour about some of these items and dig in deeper, but
Yeah.
just helping people understand the difference between the success, like a unit level performance versus economics, a historical view versus a looking forward, and an input versus an output perspective. That alone is a great insight. But then having this benchmark you can use that aligns with the franchisor with the franchisee's success and long-term franchisor success. I just think this has been a really important topic to cover. So
Well, thank
thank
you.
you
I
for being
appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. And we'll talk
All
soon.
right.
Thanks everybody for listening in.